So I just finished day one at my school in Australia, and I figured I have a little bit of time before the sun goes down, but not enough time to make it to my apartment before I do this, so I figured I'd just channel Mike Falzone, whose videos I love, and he does this walking format, so we'll give it a try. I didn't spend as much time as I thought I would observing schools today. It was more of an orientation, kind of looking at the different buildings, getting to know staff and administrators that were going to help me along the way this week. And so what I didn't expect to be such a salient theme today is how the architecture of a classroom affects or hinders student engagement and student-centered learning. They only decided to transition to project-based learning in 2008, and then after that point it took some time before they were fully a PBL school. So this is a school that very recently has, I'm going to turn around because that's kind of a sketchy alleyway, this school has only very recently done this transition. And so what does that look like in the physical layout of a classroom, right? Before they had a lot of funding, they just knocked down walls, made classes twice as big. They took desks out from around the perimeter of the room and instead replaced them with circular tables and scattered them throughout the space. So you have an open floor plan with lots of small groups, about 3 to 4 students around tables. And side note, round tables are very, very common in PBL schools that I've visited. We talked about how in a PBL classroom, there's no front of the room. There shouldn't be like one whiteboard at the front or one projector screen because of the messages that sends maybe about power in the classroom or like who has all the answers. And the whole point is in a student-centered environment, the teacher is not necessarily the one with all of the truth and all of the answers that the students just memorize. It was interesting to consider how, and when a school has to change, what physically has to change. You know, there's a lot of cost involved in that. They thought I wanted that cab. I do not want that cab. Another reason the school is really interesting is because it's a Catholic school, it's steeped in a lot of tradition. The Catholic Church is immense and very notoriously hard to change. And so there's a very fascinating paradox between the slow-moving Catholic institution and the traditions that it brings along with that versus this incredibly innovative teaching model, especially in Australia. Like, they're probably the leader in project-based learning in Australia, if not definitely one of the few. Oh, and touching on architecture again, classrooms weren't the only thing that had to change, the layout of classrooms when they made this transition. Let me get on the sidewalk. I'm gonna get run over in my first video. They also changed up what staff meetings rooms look like, right? So normally in a traditional classroom, especially the high school level, either each teacher has their own office, or at the very least, each department, like each subject matter, they have their own office, like a teacher's lounge for English, or a science teacher's lounge, etc. At this school, when they made this transition, what they did instead was they knocked down, again, there's some metaphorical resonance to saying that they knocked down all the walls. Now what you have is, again, open floor plan, completely interdisciplinary, where every teacher, when they're not teaching, can be found in this one huge floor. Like, it's pretty big. And they have lots of movable seating and conversation pods and like whiteboards around the walls. Really, it's like there's glass panels around and you can write on them. They're not actually whiteboards. And I never really made this connection until I was just talking, but having the space for teachers to be creative about, well, here's a project that we could do, and who wants to work on this project with me, and how could we connect this to the new standards that are coming out this year from the Australian government. A lot of that creativity is enabled by the layout of that faculty space, which I think is so cool. A lot of surprises today. I didn't really appreciate the extent to which architecture can affect human behavior and creativity and what messages it sends about values of an institution or priorities. It also helps to have some funding, you know, some capital to actually improve your buildings or to rebuild them in cases, but which is, you know, a luxury that not every single public school is going to have if they want to adopt PBL. But I thought that was really illuminating. So that was today's takeaway. Bye. I forgot to mention that this emphasis on how architecture affects life and creativity, it was a really strange deja vu moment from when I studied at the Globe in London. Because we talked there about how the architecture of a theater at the time influenced the different eras and even created the boundaries of the different eras of Shakespeare's works. You know, how do you see the changes of an outdoor theater with an open roof to an indoor theater? How do you see those changes reflected in his works? Types of conflict that drive the plots, or the types of characters you see. For instance, we never saw, or we very rarely saw, female actors in leading roles in Shakespeare's plays until we moved to indoor theaters. Because once we moved to indoor theaters, it made more sense to have scenes in the home where the women were. So that was just a cool connection that as I'm thinking more about it, that I made, is that, you know, the architecture of a space really affects a lot more than I appreciated ever before. So yeah, bye for real.